The beginning of the end. Emily brushed her blonde hair in the mirror of their elegant bedroom while James watched from the doorway. Her reflection smiled at him, but something felt hollow in that smile. She wore a navy dress that he had never seen before, and her perfume smelled different than usual. When he asked where she was going, she answered with vague words about meeting a friend for dinner. Nothing serious, just a casual night out, he thought to himself, but his stomach twisted with uncertainty. Their marriage had once been a fairy tale. James remembered the early days when Emily would leave little notes in his lunchbox, and they would stay up talking until sunrise about their dreams and fears. Together they had built a beautiful home with white shutters overlooking a garden full of roses. She had been his entire world, and he believed he was hers as well. But somewhere along the way, the magic had begun to fade. The late nights became more frequent. Emily would return home around midnight with explanations that never quite added up. Her phone would buzz constantly, and she would excuse herself to answer messages in other rooms. When James tried to hold her hand, she would pull away, claiming she was tired or stressed about work. He noticed that she stopped asking about his day and rarely laughed at his jokes anymore. The woman he married seemed to be slipping away like sand through his fingers. One evening, James decided to ask her directly if something was wrong. She looked at him with cold eyes and dismissed his concerns as paranoia, claiming it was just a phase they were going through. She said every marriage had difficult periods and that he was being too dramatic and clingy. James felt a sharp pain in his chest, but he said nothing. He simply nodded and watched her walk away. This moment marked the beginning of his silence. He began to piece together the truth from small clues: the way she would quickly close her laptop when he entered the room, the lipstick stain he found on her jacket that was a shade she never wore, the strange charges on their credit card for hotel rooms in the next town over. When he finally confronted her with evidence, she didn't deny it, but she also didn't seem to care. She said some things were better left unsaid, and that he wouldn't understand. She claimed it meant nothing and that she could explain everything later. But James had heard enough. He looked at his wife of 7 years and made a silent decision in that moment. He would not cry or rage or beg her to stay. Instead, he would become invisible. He would retreat into himself and let her live her lie. He would stop asking questions, stop fighting, and stop hoping that she would change. His pain became his secret, just as her affair was hers. And in that silence, he found something unexpected, a strange kind of strength that would eventually change everything. The art of invisibility. 3 months had passed since James learned the truth about Emily, and he had perfected the art of becoming a ghost in their own home. He would wake up before dawn and leave the house without saying goodbye. He would return late in the evening after she had already gone to bed. He moved through rooms like a shadow, speaking only when necessary and showing no emotion on his face. Emily seemed confused by this change at first. She would try to engage him in conversation, but he would respond with short, cold answers that discouraged further talk. Emily began to feel the weight of his silence in ways she never expected. She would prepare his favorite meals, hoping to spark some reaction, but he would eat mechanically and thank her without warmth. She would try to initiate intimacy, but he would turn away with excuses about being tired or stressed. His withdrawal was like a slow poison seeping into her consciousness. She found herself craving his attention, ironically, now that he had stopped giving it. She realized too late that she had taken his love for granted. One evening, Emily broke down crying while they sat in the living room. She asked him if he wanted a divorce, if he wanted her to leave, if there was anything she could do to fix things. James looked at her with empty eyes and said nothing. His silence was more devastating than any angry words could have been. She begged him to yell at her, to punish her, to give her any kind of reaction that would prove he still felt something for her. But he remained unmoved. He had already closed the door to his heart and thrown away the key.
Emily tried everything to reach him. She confessed all the details of her affair, hoping that honesty would bridge the gap between them. She cried and apologized and promised it would never happen again, but James listened with the same detached expression. He no longer cared about the details or the reasons behind her betrayal. His heart had already moved on, even though his body remained in the house. She had destroyed something precious and irreplaceable, and now she was experiencing the cruel consequence of her actions. During this time, James began to grow emotionally. He stopped blaming himself for her infidelity and started to understand that her choices were her own responsibility. He joined a gym, started reading self-help books, and slowly rebuilt his confidence. He reconnected with old friends who had fallen out of his life during his marriage. He realized that he had lost himself trying to be the perfect husband for a woman who didn't deserve his devotion. His silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was the sound of him learning to love himself again. Emily watched this transformation, and it terrified her. James was becoming someone she no longer recognized. He was stronger than before, more independent, more whole. She saw him laugh with his friends, and it struck her that he was laughing without her. She noticed that he no longer waited for her or tried to please her. He had simply let go. And that was the moment she truly understood what she had lost.
The point of no return. 4 more months passed, and the distance between James and Emily had become an uncrossable chasm. They lived together, but inhabited completely different worlds. Emily had ended her affair months ago, but it made no difference. James had already made his decision long before her betrayal ended. The damage was done, and no amount of apologies could repair it. She would sometimes catch him looking at old photographs of them together with an expression so sad that it broke her heart all over again. But when he noticed her watching, he would quickly look away. One morning, James announced that he had accepted a job offer in another state. Emily felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She asked him frantically if this meant he was leaving her, if they were really over. He picked up his suitcase and looked at her one final time. His eyes held no anger, no love, and no hope, just a profound sadness that came from the death of everything they had built together. He said nothing because there was nothing left to say. His silence had spoken louder than 1,000 arguments ever could. As James prepared to leave, Emily fell to her knees, crying hysterically. She begged him to stay, to give their marriage one more chance, to try therapy or anything else, but he simply walked to the door. She realized in that devastating moment that she had lost him long ago, the moment she chose to betray his trust. His silence had been more powerful than any punishment because it represented the complete withdrawal of his love. The man she had taken for granted had simply decided she was no longer worth his time or energy. Emily spent weeks in a fog of despair. She couldn't eat or sleep. She called his new number repeatedly, but he never answered. She sent him emails pouring out her heart, but received no responses. James had moved forward with his life, while she remained trapped in the consequences of her own actions. She finally understood that actions have consequences, and that silence can be the most deafening sound in the world. James, on the other hand, felt a weight lift from his shoulders with each mile that separated him from his old life. He had learned that sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is not revenge or anger, but simply to remove yourself from the equation entirely. He had taken back his power by refusing to give her the emotional reaction she craved. He had chosen dignity over drama, and in doing so, had reclaimed his life. His journey had taught him that sometimes loving yourself means letting go of people who don't deserve you, no matter how much history you share with them.
6 months had passed since James left, and Emily was barely recognizable from the woman she had been. The house felt empty and cold without his presence. She would wander through the rooms that once held so much love and joy, and now only contained regret and loneliness. She had tried reaching out to James one final time through his mother, but he had made it clear through a brief message that there was nothing left to discuss. Their marriage was officially over, and no amount of tears could change that. One day, Emily decided to attend a therapy session, something she should have done long ago during her marriage. The therapist helped her understand the root of her infidelity and the emptiness that had driven her to seek attention elsewhere. Emily realized that she had been running from herself and her own insecurities. She had used the affair as a distraction from the real problems in her marriage, instead of facing them honestly with James. She understood now that her silence during their relationship had been just as damaging as his silence after discovering the truth, except hers had been born from cowardice and his from dignity. Meanwhile, James was thriving in his new city. He had found an apartment with a beautiful view of the skyline and had been promoted at his new job. His confidence had returned, and he was learning to trust again. He even began dating a kind woman named Sarah, who treated him with respect and honesty. From the beginning, James was honest with Sarah about his past and his broken marriage. Sarah listened without judgment and slowly helped him heal the remaining wounds in his heart. Emily heard through mutual friends that James was happy and had moved on. The news hit her like a physical blow. She realized that while she was drowning in regret and trying to undo the past, James had already moved forward and created a new life for himself without her. She had lost the opportunity to grow together with him, and now she had to face her own growth alone. She began taking steps to improve herself, attending therapy regularly, volunteering at a local charity, and reconnecting with family members she had neglected during her affair. One evening, Emily received an invitation to their mutual friend's wedding. She was terrified to attend, knowing that James would be there with Sarah, but she decided to go anyway as a final step in accepting her new reality. When she saw James for the first time in 8 months, he looked genuinely happy. His arm was around Sarah, and he smiled at something she whispered in his ear. Emily felt tears spring to her eyes, not from jealousy, but from genuine regret for what she had destroyed. James noticed Emily across the room, and for a moment their eyes met. He didn't look away in anger or disgust, but with a quiet understanding that they had both moved on. He nodded slightly, as if to acknowledge her growth and her presence, and then turned his attention back to Sarah. Emily realized in that moment that this was closure. The man she had hurt had chosen to respond not with revenge, but with grace. He had taken the pain she inflicted and transformed it into wisdom and strength.
The final truth. A month after the wedding, Emily decided to write James a letter. She had no expectation that he would respond, but she felt she owed him an explanation that didn't come from a place of desperation or hope for reconciliation. In the letter, she poured out everything: her regrets, her understanding of her mistakes, her acknowledgement of how selfish she had been, and her gratitude for the years they had shared. She wrote about how she had lost herself in the marriage and used the affair as a way to escape her own unhappiness. She apologized not just for the affair, but for all the ways she had failed him as a partner. Emily wrote that she understood his silence now more than ever. She understood that sometimes the most loving thing someone can do is to let you go. She acknowledged that he owed her nothing, not forgiveness, not explanations, not a second chance. She wrote that she was proud of who he had become and that she hoped he would find lasting happiness with Sarah. She ended the letter by saying that his silence had been her greatest teacher and that she would spend the rest of her life learning the lessons it taught her. To her surprise, James responded 3 weeks later. His response was brief but kind. He wrote that he had received her letter and that he appreciated her honesty and growth. He expressed that he held no anger toward her anymore and that he genuinely wished her well in her future.
He wrote that their marriage had taught him invaluable lessons about himself and about life. He said that Sarah had helped him understand that love should not be taken for granted and that trust, once broken, must be rebuilt with actions, not just words. Most importantly, James wrote that her affair and his subsequent silence had been a catalyst for both of them to become better versions of themselves. Perhaps they had needed to learn their respective lessons separately. He wrote that he forgave her not because she deserved it, but because holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. His forgiveness didn't mean they could ever go back, but it meant they could both move forward without the weight of bitterness. Emily read the letter dozens of times, and this time the tears were different. They were tears of acceptance and understanding and genuine remorse. She realized that James had given her the greatest gift he could ever have given her after everything she had put him through. He had shown her that forgiveness was possible and that people could grow from their mistakes. She decided at that moment that she would spend her life becoming the kind of person who would never hurt someone the way she had hurt him. James continued his life with Sarah, building something real and honest from the foundation of his painful past. He had learned that sometimes silence is more powerful than words. Sometimes walking away is stronger than staying. Sometimes letting go is the ultimate act of love. Emily continued her own journey of self-discovery and healing, understanding that she could never go back, but she could certainly move forward. She had lost the love of her life, but she had gained the most important thing of all, the respect and love of herself. Years later, when they would occasionally see each other at mutual friends gatherings, they would exchange warm greetings, but nothing more. They had both moved on to different lives, different partners, and different futures, but they carried with them the lessons learned from their broken marriage. James had learned that his worth was not determined by someone else's betrayal, and Emily had learned that selfishness always comes with a price. One had chosen silence as strength, and the other had chosen that silence as a mirror to see her own flaws. Sometimes love means letting go, and sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well. Lessons and learnings from this story. From James's character, James teaches us the power of dignity and self-respect. He demonstrates that we do not need to react emotionally to every betrayal. Sometimes silence and withdrawal of attention can be more powerful than angry confrontation. His journey shows that taking care of ourselves and rebuilding our self-worth is more important than trying to convince someone to value us. His decision to leave and start fresh teaches us that sometimes the best revenge is simply moving on and creating a beautiful life without the person who hurt us. We learn that forgiveness is not weakness, but a tool for our own healing.